Before we can really begin building useful web applications or web APIs, we need to first learn about how we can store or persist the data that these applications or APIs are generating and managing. For that, we need a database. Now, there are several different types of databases out there that we can use to create this persistence within our applications. One of those databases is the MongoDB, or the Mongo database. And we're going to begin by simply doing an overview of what MongoDB is, what we would use it for, and where we would use it, as well as who uses it and why they use it. So to start off with, I'm right here on MongoDB's homepage. And right here you can see it says the database for modern applications. And with any database provider, they believe that their database is the best. And so we're going to go from the point of view that MongoDB is a really good database when we're building applications for the web and when we want a data store that can store data as documents instead of as relational tables. And we'll get into later on the difference between a document database and a relational database. Right now, we're just going to talk about MongoDB and the fact that it is a document database. It is built to be distributed for modern web applications, and the concept is that it's supposed to be more productive and faster to use and faster to get your applications up and running because the actual documents themselves are schemaless, and therefore those documents can be modified and changed really at will without it really requiring massive changes to the data in the database itself. And we'll get into what I mean by that later on as we start learning about documents within a MongoDB database. Now, as you can see from their website, a lot of different really big companies use MongoDB in their applications. Now, they may not use it in every single one of their applications, but they do use them for various applications or various portions of their applications depending upon the application's architecture. Some of these companies, actually probably all of these companies like Adobe and Google and eBay and Facebook, they probably use a combination of databases. They probably have some relational databases for reporting purposes. They have some document databases for quick data storage. And then they may also have graph databases as well. A totally different kind of database right there. So don't think of MongoDB as your only database option, nor should you consider it to be the best database option for every single application or every single task that you need to accomplish as it applies to data. It is just one of the options. And we're going to be, through this series of screencasts, we're going to be presenting this as a good option for quickly developing a web application, especially utilizing the MERN stack, which is what we'll be creating our applications in. And that, of course, is Mongo, Express, React, and Node. That's what the MERN stack stands for. It's an acronym. Right, so we've got MongoDB right here. So let's talk about what it is and how it works. And for that, we're going to go ahead and pull open our Screen Ink so that we can do some drawing, because I like to draw. So when we have our applications, or when we're building a web application or a web API, usually we find that they are set up similar to this. We've got ourselves right here a component of our application. So this would be our front end. So that could be a React application, an Angular application, or one of those single page application frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue. Or it could be a web application of some type built on Ruby, Ruby on Rails, could be PHP, could be C#.NET, ASP.NET, or Microsoft MVC or something like that. Then we have our middle tier right here. And in modern applications, this middle tier is usually some form of a RESTful API or a microservices framework or something like that, where it handles all of the business logic. So we've got the front end that handles the user experience. So let's go ahead and label that. We've got the UI/UX, so the user interface/user experience on the front end. And then here we've got our business logic layer that usually handles all of the business logic, how that data gets pulled in, manipulated, modified, validated, verified. All would happen right here inside of this RESTful API or web application. And then the final part, well, not the final part, usually probably within this layer right here, we're usually going to have a data access layer that sits kind of right here. And so we would have a data access layer or a DAL. And this DAL, really, its responsibility is most of the time data persistence. So it's mostly concerned about persisting the data that is being manipulated and modified here within the business logic layer. And last but not least, we are going to have some form of a database or a persistence layer that handles the long-term storage of data when it's at rest. Now this is data persistence, or the DAL manages data persistence as the data is in transit. In other words, as it is moving from the front end into the API and then from the API into the database. So that transit right there from the API into the database, that's what the DAL handles. And then once that data is in the right format, has been verified, modified, and cleaned up, once it's in that correct format, it then would be stored permanently or semi-permanently inside of an actual database. So let's go ahead and mark this down as the database. The database is going to be that more permanent data persistence. So we're going to go ahead and note that as final. Oops, every time we do that it changes the color. Let's say final persistence of the data. So that's the final persistence. It's stored there long term and is no longer in transit, so it's at rest. So this is where MongoDB lives, is right here as a database. And we usually call those databases, or the systems that hold databases, we call them we call them DBMSs. So DBMS. And so DBMS, what that stands for is a database management system. So database management system, that's what DBMS stands for. And some of these database management systems that actually manage the databases are going to be things like Microsoft SQL Server. It could be MySQL. Could be PostgreSQL. It also could be MongoDB. Could be, let's go ahead and hit enter there. It could be GraphQL, could be Firebase, and on and on. There are a bunch of different DBMSs out there that manage databases. Now the reason why I'm kind of distinguishing between a DBMS and a database is the DBMS is actually the system or the application, that process, that server, that is managing individual databases that are being stored by an application. In other words, databases are a group of records that, or collections that are tied together or related together, and usually they're related together by application or by function. And then we usually have more than one database that lives inside of a DBMS. So we might have a database here and a database here, and maybe this particular database, let's go ahead and label these just so we can see what I'm talking about. Maybe this database right here, this one is specifically for our application, so we'll call this My Apps Database. And so this is the actual database for it, but maybe we have a group of different applications that all use the same login and log out functionality. So we may have a database over here that is for user, oops, it changed color again. Let's do user auth. So maybe this is a user authentication database right here. And then maybe we have another app, a mobile app, and it has a database. And this right here is for our mobile app. And we'll just call this my mobile app database. I'll just say DB. All right. So hopefully this helps you understand where MongoDB lives inside of our architecture of a web app, and the fact that it is the final persistence when data is at rest. And that is that data lives inside of a database, and that database is a database inside of a DBMS. And MongoDB is a type of DBMS, or a management system that can manage one or more databases for us for one or more applications that we may have built. So this is a simple overview of MongoDB, as well as where Mongo lives within an architecture and what exactly MongoDB is.